So I've decided to make a video of the short piece that I wrote yesterday, and the way my reasoning is working is that today many of us are so unsettled and nervous and sad and it's so difficult for us to concentrate that I think it's easier to watch some kind of video that is where someone is speaking directly to you than perhaps reading a text that can be a little concentrated and perhaps less easy to delve into at times like these. So that was my reasoning, and also I just think it's so pertinent because yesterday I happened to write in this text about part of it at least refers to the Christian evangelical right in America and their support of Israel for in order to bring to the fore the end of days, Armageddon, basically the apocalypse and the coming of the second Messiah, and how they see Israel's presence and actions as essential for that purpose. So and then today it so happened that a lot of the media was reporting on the fact that the many of the generals who are today forming part of this of the forces that are attacking Iran, many of the US generals have been openly saying to the conscripts the importance of this operation for bringing Armageddon into realization, telling them that Trump has been chosen by Christ as the dominant figure who, under Israel's auspices, will basically direct the forces to this mayhem and chaos that will bring through the destruction of Iran, that will bring into being the end of days. And I mean, I know these things, it feels like we're in some kind of alternate universe or whatever when you hear these things. I mean, how could this be the reality of the 21st century? And yet it is. And yet it is. And I just wanted to add a very personal note that I never thought it would be possible to feel so ashamed to be a member of the Western world, to have been born and been grown up, and for me to say that this today is my culture, the West that has totally and absolutely lost its moral compass, that is inside an abyss where morality has been completely and utterly annihilated, and instead we have we are in a world where might is right. These are the only laws today, and where a world that doesn't even try to pretend really that although it believes somehow, it believes in its justification for acting in this way, where but actually it is full blown imperialism. We thought we were in a post-colonial naively thought that we were in this post-colonial times, and we see colonialism being thrown back at us, more violent if possible than ever, because today we have the arms that are more sophisticated and more able to kill in such in so viciously and in such huge quantities than ever before. And of course, at the forefront of this killing frenzy is the Zionist entity, is Israel, which has absolutely no value, has no value for human life whatsoever, if it is not the human life of its own Jewish citizens and of Jews in general. It basically sees all other life forces as nothing more than as pawns, which are completely expendable to achieve their aims, which are both the hegemonic aim of achieving total hegemony of the Middle East, total control of the Middle East, so that the Middle East becomes its backyard for it to maneuver in and control and manipulate for its own interests, solely for its own interests. And anyone who gets in the way will be eliminated. And of course, there is the strength of the immense strength which we are only just beginning to understand, especially with things like the Epstein files and of course the mega donors like Miriam Adelson, Trump's largest donor, who gave tens and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump, but on condition. And we see what those conditions very clearly are now, both with his major hand in the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and with this total devastation, destruction, which has only just begun, of Iran. And let us not forget that Persia is one of the oldest and richest cultures in our humanity, and has so much heritage and has contributed so much culturally to the richness of our world. And it is just and we are only at the beginning, but we know what Israel is capable of, and that is, we've seen total flattening that it has done in Gaza, and we've seen already that one of its very first acts was to attack a girls' school, and an elementary girls' school, with almost 200 young girls. I think it was 185 the last time, or 186 the last time I looked, that had young girls' bodies that had been accounted for. There are many more, I think, still under the rubble, and they were just taken out, destroyed. But what does that matter? I mean, there tens and tens of thousands of children have been slaughtered in Gaza, and no one cares. And the slaughter in Gaza is going on today in a so-called ceasefire. And during this devastation of Iran, Israel has deliberately closed even more. They were never opened, but closed the borders even more to squeeze to squeeze the impoverished Gazans even more, so that food and medicines and vital resources have been restricted even more. And they've always been restricted. I mean, they've even during this so-called ceasefire, Israel has never opened the borders in the way that they promised to do to the delivery of such necessary goods. And let us not forget that as well as what most people understand today is not the official figure of 76,000 or whatever it is, but actually hundreds of thousands of Gazans who have been slaughtered or lost their lives through Israel's campaign of destruction, devastation, starvation, and restriction of all vital resources for the necessity of life. In total, there are hundreds of thousands of Gazans who have perished in this genocide. But let us not forget that not only is that still going on, but this is their modus operandi, and they have no value for human life. And it's been, as I've written, and you'll hear in a little minute, I mean, it's been completely expedient for that life to have been extinguished for Israel. And of course the rest of the world has, not that it ever really cared. I mean, the West certainly has been complicit in this genocide, but even the little focus that was given to it in some way, of course, from the bias of the Zionist vision, if you like. But even that little focus has gone, and they're completely forgotten as this genocide continues. It's a shameful and lamentful time for us to be alive. And I mean, it's difficult at times to actually want to continue in this kind of world where the values that we once thought were still part of our civilization and were a fundamental part of it are non-existent, or have been absolutely just put aside, so that no longer is it the values for the greater good, but it is the values for very particular bodies of existence. And so the West is very much in its colonial supremacist mindset today, and at the forefront of that is the Zionist lobby and Israel. So I'm going to read my text now. So these are a few cogitations in these dark and seemingly apocalyptic times, in which the Zionist entity as the central actor has been responsible for so much of the destruction and bloodshed in our world. Destruction and bloodshed that has been predicted both from the humanitarian left and the Christian right of the political and social milieu. The Christian right's or evangelical Zionist take on this is quite simple and two-dimensional in practice. Israel is today's grand master, the centerpiece in the almost Gnostic understanding of how God's chosen people can blow their trumpets and sound their horns as they lead humanity into the apocalyptic mayhem of the end of days. A place of reckoning from where the second Messiah will arise and announce himself, where the dead will rise from their graves, and where Christian glory alone will manifest itself throughout the world. For the evangelicals, then, the Jews are a necessary and transient component to facilitate this apotheosis of fusion between the higher and lower Jerusalems. The belief driving them forward in their unquestioned and unwavering support for Israel as it brings the world to its knees in a lustful and bloody frenzy of unbridled destruction, and as it marches blindly forwards towards a vision of ever greater power and dominance in the region, is therefore a wholly messianic belief transgressing any kind of humanistic concern, and for which no sacrifice is too great, and for which no limits or red lines are conceivable. This evangelical fervour, embodied in one way or another by tens of millions of Americans, many of whom have extremely influential positions within the government and decision-making process of the US, and whose allegiance today lies first and foremost with the Zionist entity, and Mike Huckabee would be an example par excellence, has many parallels with the messianic fervour of the nationalist religious Jews in Israel-Palestine, many, if not most of whom, are settlers in the West Bank, an area they refer to by their biblical names of Judea and Samaria. For these messianic national religious Jews, their beliefs overlapping significantly with those of the evangelical Christians, the Messiah will come into being only after the Israelites perform God's wishes for them occupying all of historical Palestine and possibly beyond. And this is referring to a biblical land deed which, as Carlson Tucker pointed out during his interview with Mike Huckabee, when taken literally, extends from the Euphrates to the Nile, and which would include parts of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. Thus, for the national religious Messianic Jews, the notion of a greater Israel, a term which is constantly referred to by the settlers and by many of Israel's government ministers today, including Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, as well as by the Messianic national religious Prime Minister in waiting, Naftali Bennett, is a justification for occupation, expansionism, ethnic cleansing, and, as we have seen, genocide. And of course now the devastating attack and war and destruction of Iran. It should be noted, however, that for the traditional ultra-Orthodox Jews, represented by many of the Hasidic sects, apart from the Chabad Lubavitch Jews who today have fervently taken on the national religious theological beliefs, An entirely opposite chronology exists, where, from a theological basis, Israel can only be declared once the Messiah comes down, and not before. And this explains the reason why they remain staunchly in the anti-Zionist camp and extremely critical of the existence of Israel and its actions. But for the national religious Messianic Jews, and in a similar way to the evangelical Christians, no liberal humanitarian or humanistic considerations enter into the eschatological equation whatsoever. They are working fervently for the creation of a greater Israel, and there are no sacrificial limits and no red lines that could possibly divert them from their goal. The sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives in the Gaza genocide, for instance, is all par for the course, and certainly of no concern inside their aspirations of the greater Israel dream. Quite the contrary. The Palestinians have been seen as an obstacle to that dream, and thus their elimination is no more than a matter of expedience. Many of us on the left of the political spectrum are only too aware of this messianic fervour driving Israel's vicious, inhumane and barbaric oppression of the Palestinian people. However, there are no less essential elements that require consideration in order to more fully understand the nefarious behaviour of the Frankensteinian state of Israel. For we must not forget that at its origins, Zionism was a secular, settler colonial ideology that came into being out of the mindset of European colonialism. A white supremacist mindset that saw the natives as no more than primitive savages, who were an inconvenience to the settler colonialist implementation and best dealt with through oppression and ultimately elimination. The idea of human rights for these savages, regarded as subhuman at best, was hardly a consideration. In its most essential ways, this supremacist mindset of the colonist has followed through into the modern state of today's Israel. So within the internationally recognized borders of Israel, the Palestinians are tolerated as third-class citizens, as long as they don't step out of line or reveal any kind of solidarity or allegiance with their brethren in Gaza and the West Bank. In other words, as long as they show their allegiance to the Jewish state in every respect, their presence, for now, is tolerated. That is why, during the ongoing genocide in Gaza, although many Jewish Israelis on the very left of the political spectrum, in truth a tiny, minuscule percentage of Israel's population, have spoken out and critiqued the Zionist entity for its actions, Israeli Palestinians have not dared to do so. And those few who did quickly found that their lives were taken apart and utterly destroyed by the state. For those Palestinians who subsist in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, it is an entirely different matter, however. They represent the barbaric, primitive savages who are in the way, who separate Israel from realizing its dreams of freely occupying the whole of historical Palestine, and for whom oppression, ethnic cleansing, and genocide are the only conceivable ways for effectively occupying the whole of this territory. The state of Israel, the Jewish state, thus exists inside that secular, settler colonialist mindset of white European supremacism, whilst at the same time hybridized with the ethno-supremacism of the messianic element of its population. This hybridized entity has today two central aims. Firstly, to work towards the realization of the greater Israel dream, with no respect for borders or the sovereignty of other nations. And this greater Israel vision can vary and can incorporate simply the whole of historical Palestine, or it can extend to include up to all the biblical lands from the Euphrates to the Nile, as mentioned. Moreover, these aspirations of occupying the whole of historical Palestine were clearly stated by the original founders of Zionism, such as Herzl and also in Ben Gurion's writings as well. And it can be found both implicitly and explicitly in numerous places throughout their writings. In reality, virtually all of historical Palestine is already in Israel's hands today. Israel has full sovereignty over East Jerusalem, whilst the West Bank has already been de facto annexed, and as the ethnic cleansing there continues and accelerates daily. As for Gaza, well, and in addition, significant parts of Syria and Lebanon are today under Israel's full sovereignty or control. And secondly, Israel's second and no less important aim is to achieve total hegemony in the region. A goal also to be realized with no respect for the sovereignty or rights of other nations. And this is where Israel's alliance with the US and other Western powers is so important. For it is only with that hegemony that Israel can achieve its full aims. So, we've already spoken about how important the Christian Zionist aspect of this is, and how their adherence to Israel and the Zionist dream or the Zionist aspirations is so pertinent to understanding the actions of Israel today. But if we put that aside, Western support for Israel's position, and particularly that of the US, arming and backing it to the hilt, and essentially turning it into an indomitable Frankensteinian killing machine, is seen as an effective means of upholding the imperialist aims of the Western neo-colonial powers. By turning it into one of the most effective killing machines in the world, Israel can serve to regulate any state in the region that does not toe the line or that dares set itself up as an independent entity opposing the exploitation of its resources and the colonialist, imperialist, Machiavellian machinations of the West. In short, Israel exists through Western eyes to prevent any country in the region from going it alone and acting outside of the auspices of Western US hegemony. A country like Iran, for instance. Both Israel and the US, and together with their Western peons, see their collaboration as a win-win situation. From the US's side, their imperialistic aims to retain hegemonic control in the Middle East can be assured through the actions of their Israel proxy. Whilst, from Israel's side, their tiny state being built up into one of the world's most heavily armed bodies, equipped with some of the most sophisticated and offensive killing devices in existence, plays right into the aspirations that Israel has for its hegemonic control of the region, as well as for its expansionist desires. And now I'd like to talk a little more about Tucker Carlson, his interview. And for many of you, this might be surprising that I'm talking about Tucker Carlson. A few years ago, many of us would have seen him as this right-wing extremist, part of perhaps the neo-colonial, neoconservative America, and a warmonger and such like. I mean, he's obviously gone some kind of massive transformation internally, morally, and and I never really knew the past Tucker Carlson. I think I avoided him because of what I had heard about him. But I have to say that from what I see of him today, I don't agree with all his views, but he is someone who today, from listening to him and intently, I can say that I respect him greatly and I admire him. He is what I would call a true, authentic Christian. He despises the evangelical Christians because he sees them as totally perverting the Christian message and selling themselves to Israel's nefarious aims and dreams. And he has basically. He values with the total sanctity of human life, whoever and wherever that might be. So, of all creeds, all religions, all colours, all races, he respects the sanctity of human life. And where it is transgressed, he speaks out against it. And I respect him greatly for that. Anyway, it should come then as no surprise that someone as astute as Tucker Carlson, in his latest podcast, and you can see I have a post that a couple of days ago, that 2 or 3 days ago, that I posted with a link to this. It should come no surprise that he speaks of Israel's duplicitous behavior and of how it is deceiving the US in order to ultimately be in a position where it has complete control over the Middle East without American or anyone else's interference. In other words, according to him, Israel will exploit the US alliance for as long as it proves expedient to do so, and then ditch it once it becomes powerful enough to go it alone. And he talks about this because he's defending American interests, and he's trying to alert the American public to this, basically saying that Israel is taking America into very questionable paths, totally against the values out of which the country came into being. That's his take on it. But anyway, be this as it may, whatever the long-term Machiavellian power plays in progress, the fact is that it serves US and Israeli interests in their entirety to work together at the present moment to take out Iran as an independent powerhouse in the Middle East. A powerhouse that has to date avoided selling any part of its soul to the demonic and vampiric jaws of Western imperialism. Of course, we need to put aside the transient puppet rule of the Shah of Persia, who came into being after a democratically elected president was deposed in 1953 by a coup d'etat which was orchestrated by the MI6 and the CIA. And Iran then also is consistently the only power in the Middle East to show unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people and their tragic plight under the brutal Zionist occupation. Another evident reason for Israel to destroy it, to annihilate it. That's their hope. Or bring it, and then with America's help, to create another puppet regime which will be in the lap of the Zionist lobby and US and Israel interests. So I'm going to stop there. And I just hope that there is an end to this madness and to the evil of the day where we find ourselves.